You didn't love them halfway. You didn't love them conditionally. You didn't love them out of convenience. You loved them with your full heart. But what did they give you back? Not their tenderness, not their consistency, not their care. They gave you their fractures, their fears, their unhealed shadows. And somehow, they made you feel responsible for wounds that weren't yours to begin with. But listen closely. This story isn't about blame. It's about clarity. It's about understanding why they loved you in a way that hurt. And it's about reclaiming the power you lost while trying to heal a heart that didn't know how to receive love without breaking it. Let's begin. You gave them love, the way sunlight gives warmth. Naturally, instinctively, without needing a reason. You showed up emotionally, mentally, spiritually, even on days you didn't have much left for yourself. You poured into them what no one had ever poured into you. And for a moment, it felt like they cherished it, like they saw you, like they valued you. But slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, something shifted. They didn't meet your love with the same softness. They met it with hesitation, with fear, with distance, with confusion, not because you were too much, but because your love touched parts of them they had spent years hiding, parts they didn't want to feel, parts they didn't want to confront. Your love brought comfort, but your presence brought exposure. You made them see their unhealed wounds, their unhealthy patterns, their emotional immaturity, their resistance to connection, their fear of being truly known. And instead of growing with the love you offered, they projected their pain onto the one person who never deserved it. You, the one who tried, the one who cared, the one who stayed. You weren't just loving them. You were carrying them, carrying their insecurities, carrying their trauma responses, carrying the emotional weight they refused to face. And little by little, you began to shrink, to fit what they could handle. You softened your words. You silenced your needs. You made yourself smaller, so they wouldn't feel overwhelmed by the depth of your here. But love should never require self-abandonment. And yet, that's what they taught you. Not with lessons spoken, but with patterns repeated. You gave them stability. They gave you uncertainty. You gave them honesty. They gave you confusion. You gave them peace. They gave you chaos, wrapped in charm. And here's the cruelest part. They made you believe that you were the problem for wanting something real. But deep down, beneath all the mixed signals, beneath the distance and the emotional withdrawal, there was something they could never hide. You triggered the version of themselves they weren't ready to confront. You made them feel unmasked, exposed, seen. They didn't know how to love you without hurting you because they had never learned how to love themselves without running. And so they ran, not always physically. Sometimes they ran emotionally, mentally, energetically, spiritually. They ran back into familiarity, even if familiarity was dysfunctional, even if it meant losing you, because your love wasn't just love to them. It was accountability. It was maturity. It was growth. It was depth. And those things terrify people who have never truly healed. But here's what you need to understand, and I need you to hear this with your whole heart. Their inability to hold your love does not diminish its power. It does not diminish your worth. And it does not mean you should stop loving the way you do. Your love is not too much. They were simply not enough healed to receive it. Not because you were wrong, but because they weren't ready. And yet, they left you with their broken pieces, their emotional shrapnel, their unresolved wounds, splattered onto your spirit, as if you caused them. But you didn't. You never did. You were the safest thing they had ever touched. And that safety felt unfamiliar, threatening, too honest, too real. So they pushed away the hand that tried to heal them, and you ended up bleeding from wounds you didn't create. But this is where your story begins to change, because now you understand, and understanding is the beginning of liberation. You didn't just care for them, you carried them. And the dangerous thing is, you didn't notice when the weight stopped being shared and started being dumped onto your heart. Because that's how people like this move. Not with gratitude, not with reciprocity, but with quiet extraction taking from you until you mistake bleeding for bonding. But let's go deeper now, because this part is where the truth gets uncomfortable. They didn't choose you because they were ready for love. They chose you because they were starving for comfort. And you, with your softness, your warmth, your instinct to understand, felt like home to someone who never learned how to treat a home with respect. You saw their pain and tried to heal it. They saw your love and used it as a hiding place. And the cruel part? They let you believe that your love was enough to fix the fractures they refused to face. You showed up fully, completely, honestly. You texted back with heart. You listened without judgment. You cared even when you were tired. You gave love even when you needed it yourself. And they responded with distance, confusion, half effort, half truths, half love. They gave you just enough affection to keep you hopeful, but never enough presence to make you feel secure. Because people like this don't know how to connect without hurting the hand that reaches for them. They don't know how to receive love without resenting the one who offers it. They don't know how to stay close without feeling exposed. So instead of opening up, they pull away. Instead of appreciating you, they project their wounds onto you. Instead of healing with you, they hurt you in the same ways they were once hurt. And slowly, without realizing, you start shrinking. You start questioning yourself. You start apologizing for things that weren't your fault. You start walking on emotional glass, hoping not to trigger whatever ghost they're still fighting inside. You start confusing their inconsistency with your inadequacy. You start thinking, if I just love them harder, maybe they'll finally feel safe. But loving someone harder does not make them healthy. It only makes you exhausted. You are not a cure for someone's emotional negligence. You are not a bandage for someone's unresolved past. You are not responsible for someone who refuses to take responsibility for themselves. Here's the truth. Most people don't want to face. Some people don't break you because they're evil. They break you because they're broken. You walked in with light. They only knew how to survive in darkness. You offered connection. They only understood withdrawal. You tried to build something. They were still trying to rebuild themselves. And instead of saying, I'm not ready, they said nothing and let you get hurt by the silence. Instead of healing, they hid. Instead of communicating, they deflected. Instead of appreciating you, they underestimated you. Because your love was too steady for someone who was used to chaos. Your presence was too honest for someone who was used to pretending. Your consistency was too real for someone who didn't know how to stay. But here's the part you must never forget. Their inability to love you was not a reflection of your worth, but of their wounds. You didn't lose them. They lost you because they pushed away the one thing that could have helped them grow. They didn't just hurt you because you were weak. They hurt you because you were strong. Strong enough to love deeply. Strong enough to try. Strong enough to repair what they kept breaking. People like this aren't intimidated by your flaws. They're intimidated by your capacity to care, your capacity to show up, your capacity to forgive, your capacity to feel. Because deep down they know they cannot match what you bring. And instead of rising to meet your love, they retreat into the familiar arms of avoidance. It is not love they run from. It is responsibility, accountability, intimacy, growth. And the second you love them, in a way they never learned to love themselves, they panic, not because you're wrong for them, but because you reveal exactly how unprepared they are for someone right. And here's the twist you didn't see coming. They will miss you long before you realize you're finally healing. Because the moment you stop trying, the moment you step back, the moment your light is no longer available, on demand they feel it, not in their words, not in their actions, but in the quiet, in the stillness, in the emptiness they built with their own hands. Because people like this don't appreciate love when it's present. They only understand it once it's gone. They don't cherish warmth until they're cold. They don't value consistency until they face silence. You were not their mistake. They were their own. And one day, they'll realize that what you offered wasn't ordinary. It wasn't replaceable. It wasn't disposable. It was rare. It was real. It was love. That didn't run away. And the saddest truth is, they won't find it again in the places they run to. Because the love they lost wasn't fragile. It wasn't needy. It wasn't weak. It was strong enough to carry them and strong enough to walk away. Once it learned that carrying them was destroying you, you loved them with both hands open. But when someone doesn't know what to do with softness, they start treating it like a threat. And that's where everything changes. Not because you changed, but because your love touched the places they spent their whole life trying to hide. They didn't reject you. They rejected the mirror you accidentally became. Because your presence revealed every unhealed part they tried to pretend didn't exist. You didn't expose them. Your love did. You didn't call out their wounds. Your consistency did. Your kindness did. Your loyalty did. And instead of saying, I'm afraid, they acted distant. Instead of saying, I'm overwhelmed, they acted cold. Instead of saying, I don't know how to receive what you're giving, they acted like you were asking for too much. But you weren't. You were asking for the bare minimum: attention, effort, presence, respect, care, accountability, honesty. They couldn't give it, not because you didn't deserve it, but because they couldn't even give it to themselves. So instead, they gave you their wounds, their fears, their insecurities, their patterns, their emotional mess, their avoidance, their silence, their confusion, their self-sabotage. Every time you got close, they flinched, not because you were dangerous, but because intimacy felt like walking barefoot into parts of themselves they never cleaned up. They weren't used to being seen, not the way you saw them. You didn't love the performance. You loved the person, and that alone terrified them. So they gave you distance to protect themselves. They gave you excuses to hide their fear. They gave you mixed signals to avoid admitting how deeply you reached them. They gave you silence because silence was easier than truth. And still, you tried, you stayed, you poured, you carried love in both hands and hoped they'd meet you halfway. But wounded people don't meet you halfway. They meet you where their fear allows. And for them, that wasn't far. They didn't know how to hold your love, so they treated it like a weight. They didn't know how to receive your heart, so they acted like it wasn't valuable. They didn't know how to grow with you, so they pulled away. before they had to. But here's the truth. They felt everything, more than you think, more than they'll ever say. And that's why they ran. Not because you were wrong, but because you were right. Right for them, right for their growth, right for their healing, right for the version of themselves they aren't ready to meet. You weren't the cause of their wounds. You were the light that hit the bruise. And some people aren't ready for illumination. They're used to love that hurts, love that betrays, love that leaves, love that disappoints, love that conditions. So when you brought love, that didn't match their past. They didn't trust it. They didn't trust you. They didn't trust safety. They didn't trust softness. They didn't trust consistency. Not because of you, but because of where they came from. Your love wasn't the problem. It was the contrast. And deep down, they knew you weren't like the rest. That's why their fear got louder than their love. You didn't lose them. They forfeited you. Because healing felt heavier than leaving. Because staying required honesty they weren't ready to face. Because loving you would require loving themselves. And they don't know how. But hear this clearly. You didn't fail. You didn't break anything. You didn't ask for too much. You didn't love wrong. You loved someone who wasn't ready to be held by hands that didn't shake. You were the turning point they weren't prepared for. You were the blessing they couldn't rise to meet. You were the softness their wounds rejected. You gave them love, pure, real, grounding love. They gave you their unhealed past, wrapped in the shape of their behavior. But that doesn't make you foolish. It makes you rare. It makes you powerful. It makes you unforgettable. Because the truth is, your love didn't break them. It revealed what was already broken. And one day, when the noise of their fear finally quiets, they'll look back and realize exactly what your presence was. Not a mistake, not a phase, not a lesson, but a gift. A gift they weren't ready for. A gift they couldn't protect. A gift they didn't know how to keep. And that's not your burden. It's theirs. You weren't meant to fix their wounds, only to show them they existed. That is the weight of being the one who loves deeply in a world that isn't used to depth. And even now, even with everything, their soul remembers you. Because real love doesn't disappear. It only waits for the person to finally rise to the level you were already standing on. And here's the part they never tell you. The part they hope you never figure out. Healing doesn't begin when they apologize. Healing begins when you finally understand what their behavior was actually saying. Because deep down, they were never rejecting you. They were rejecting the parts of themselves they saw reflected in you. You showed them kindness, and it exposed how unkind they were to themselves. You showed them loyalty, and it reminded them how unreliable they had always been. You showed them what love could feel like, and it terrified them because they didn't feel worthy of it. They weren't pushing you away. They were pushing away the version of themselves they were too afraid to face. And yet, out of everyone, they could have hurt out of everyone. They could have projected their pain onto. They chose the one person who meant them no harm. You, you, the one who cared, the one who tried, the one who softened for them, the one who believed there was something good in them, the one who saw the child inside the chaos. But wounded people don't know how to receive love. They only know how to survive it. So instead of holding your heart, they handed you their trauma. Instead of appreciating your softness, they mistook it for weakness. Instead of protecting your love, they destroyed the bridge you built for them. And you spent nights wondering, what's wrong with me? Why wasn't I enough? Why did my love turn into their weapon? But here's the truth. You were never meant to carry alone. You were never the problem. Your love was simply too honest for someone who was used to running. Because your presence did something they weren't prepared for. It forced them to confront themselves. And confronting yourself hurts far more than losing someone you weren't ready for. So they fled. They sabotaged. They blamed you for the wounds they never healed. Because admitting that they hurt the one person who gave them real love, that requires maturity they didn't yet have. But one day, when the noise fades, when the distractions collapse, when the people they chose don't offer the depth you did, they'll sit with the truth. They weren't left with nothing. They were left with everything they didn't know how to keep. And the guilt? It won't show up as tears. It won't show up as apologies. It won't show up as closure. It will show up quietly, at night, in silence, in the moments when their mind drifts to the one person who loved them without armor, the one person they wounded without thinking, the one person they still feel in the places they can't speak about. But here's where your story takes its power back, because you are no longer the person they hurt. You are the person who healed in spite of it. You are the person who grew softer, not bitter, stronger, not guarded, wiser, not closed. You didn't just survive what they did. You outgrew the version of yourself that tolerated it. And now your love is no longer something they get access to. Now it belongs to someone who won't fear it, won't misuse it, won't weaponize it, won't run from it. Someone who recognizes that your heart isn't a battlefield, it's a blessing. And the moment you realize this, the moment you truly internalize it, is the moment you stop asking why they hurt you and start understanding why they couldn't keep you. Because you didn't lose them. You lost the version of yourself who accepted less than she deserved. And that's the most powerful ending this story could ever have.